Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's Fake Accents Unite. I am joined this week by the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And by Rose of Dawn. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to see you all. I just pop the chat out so I can read that easier. We've got some interesting articles, not necessarily political, but for some reason I guess the feminists seem to have really kicked off this week. In the last couple of days, but I do have one non-feministy topic as well. So there's that. Good evening, Tailed Feature. You happy to have his wrench? There we go.
The wrenches are really important. It makes you feel honoured.
Today he's not called Mr. Tailed Feature. Today he's called Mr. 5000.
Has he hit 5K? Amazing. It's his 2-year anniversary, and he was moaning that he was at 4998. That was the case. But I'm sure he's got a stream later, which I'm sure no one will turn up to because they'll be too busy watching this one.
I definitely recall seeing a screenshot of a number 5001. So yes, he's definitely Mr. 5000 this evening.
Marvelous. Well, I wish him all the best. You should give him a sub if you're not already. He does great like musical parody videos and stuff like that. He also wrote Count Dankula's theme music for his channel. So,
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so no one does because Dankula never actually credits him with with creating it, and no matter how many times he pokes fun, So is the nature of the things. Good evening, Lux. Let me see what we got. I'm a physics student. One of the lecturers talked about that CERN thing. Yes, you're getting ahead of me right now, but I'll start us off fairly light. If I screen share for just a moment, then and present to everyone. Marvelous. And we have Boris Johnson. Now, I think personally that Sky News here is somewhat reaching. Okay, but as you can see, it says Boris Johnson trolls Theresa May by running through a field of wheat. Quote. In the center of a bitter row, he has been photographed recreating her naughtiest moment.
Is he in his boxers?
He always tends to wear flamboyant running shorts.
I still think he missed the ultimate opportunity here.
Because
clearly he should not have been running through a field of wheat in this manner. I don't think it's a field of wheat anyway, if you actually look closely. It doesn't look like wheat.
No, it's not at all.
But clearly he should have been kind of jogging along whilst carrying a tray of teacups, in particular Cadbury's egg teacups.
Oh, God. Yes. Like the Sports Direct one or something like that.
All of a sudden, the price of those shot straight up. I have one at home and it's just amazing. But I think this is genuinely just part of his running routine and not necessarily a publicity stunt. Because like everything in this article is so circumstantial and they're just trying to draw it out. They're like, he's in a beige field. Someone take a photo.
Not trolling. He's not trolling Theresa May there, isn't he? He's trolling Russell Crowe.
Oh, quite possibly.
In the Gladiator, there was always these kind of dream sequences where he's walking through a field of wheat.
Yeah, and it's got like his son and his wife at like the other side.
Honestly, I feel bad because I still haven't seen Gladiator, but there you go.
It's really old
it's
film.
to the back of the list. If you want to watch a Roman epics,
you want me to watch Ben-Hur,
first you must watch Ben-Hur and then Spartacus. And then somewhere at the back of the list, you can put Gladiator, but you need to get your priorities right.
Indeed, Luxolex, you shouldn't have been banned from my Discord. I have no idea why that's happened. If you drop me a message either on Discord or on Twitter, we'll sort that out, and I'll have a word with the ban hammers, and so the rest. But back to go on.
I was just wanting to allude to the fact that I'd had a conversation today with someone in which superheroes came up. And I basically said, look, if you want to watch a superhero film, watch Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve. Don't watch any of the sequels. You'll lose the will to live. Don't watch anything thereafter that has got anybody in spandex or bodysuits or anything like that. it's the only one worthwhile. At which, at one point, I then actually provided a trailer, to which the reply was, "Oh, looks vintage."
Does he not know you that well? I mean, everything about you is vintage, from the brass of your gramophone to the glass of your jar.
Yes, indeed. But, I just sort of thought, well, yes, of course it looks vintage. It was made a long time ago. It's pretty much the first superhero movie, but
Indeed.
it makes all the others pale in comparison, because unlike those which have, the Hulk punching people through skyscrapers, it actually has a bit of charm in places, and his being able to fly is actually being presented to you as something magical, something wondrous. There is wonderment when you're actually watching this movie, and you feel, yes, that is something special. That's a good film. Whereas, yes, I'm sorry, all these Dark Knight monstrosities and whatever. I know sort of people sort of think, oh, well, no, those are the good ones, the Dark Knight ones, those are the good ones. And you think, well, yes, but in 30 years' time, no one's going to be watching them anymore.
Oh, I respectfully disagree, Mr. Britisher, but
well, yes, but then, I mean, we know that you're frequently wrong.
Speaking of me being wrong, I hear that you've been very sneaky, and you have somehow managed to pull.
Well, it's more than likely, if I'm sneaky, it's more than likely got something to do with the academic agent.
Oh, you'd think so, but this was all your own doing, of course. Although, knowing the academic agent, well, we can get onto that in a minute. But the I know full well that you managed to sneak a spot onto Sargon's channel for this week's week
yes,
that was not.
Oh
stupid.
God!
I did. Yes.
And
So that means that you no longer have the last ever This Week in Stupid.
I don't. No, it's been taken from me.
And I have also, I think, I can more than likely proudly claim that I'm the first person to introduce Vivaldi onto Sargon's channel.
Successfully, at least. But although speaking of the academic agent's sneaky ways, would you put it past him to have snuck in for next week's edition?
I wouldn't at all. I've in the comments that I saw, there was quite a few people who said they would like to see the academic agent.
Yeah, I'm going to be quite disappointed if he doesn't.
There were also one or two people who said that this was actually Sargon actively trolling the academic agent by effectively rubbing his face in it. Then again, it depends on whether the academic agent wants to do it. It is a lot of work to do something like this.
Yes,
I think you can confirm by now, not so obvious.
And he is, yes. Well, it took about 7 or 8 hours, yes, to make the first one. And then I did my not so newsworthy segment for this weekend, and that was a bit shorter, but still took a little while.
The problem is, that what you're effectively doing is you're summarizing news. So if you can squash it into half an hour, how much time does it actually take just to read it? If you would just take the news articles to which you link, and you would then just read those, how long does it take you to read those articles? Now consider that those articles perhaps represent what? Between 10 and 20% of the articles you have to read, because most of them eventually you're not going to use, in order to get to kind of the juicy ones, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes.
That's just the reading you have to do. That's before you start editing and recording and putting a video together. So it's not the it's not the shortest possible process that you can come up with.
Yes. Sora Sapiens. Sora Sapiens donated $5. Thank you very much, sir. You can donate and get your message read out as well by clicking the link in the description. Enough shilling. But he says, Sargon has privatized This Week in Stupid and allowed it to be subject to the free market. What he felt, it's amazing, actually, how many channels have decided, just in the lieu of many things, to start a weekly news segment just off the back. I believe V has started a weekly news stream. Was it Short Fat Utaku, who's one of Sargon's friends, did a mock-up This Week in Stupid as well. I started one, although I was asked to start one, so that's my excuse. The British is obviously already running one. How long is it before we see Sly Sneak's weekly news roundup?
Well, yes, but I still hold that I'm the only person who managed to set Sargon's ziggurat on fire.
Yes, up the ziggurat, lickety split. But sorry,
I would find doing one of these things absolutely insane. Like whenever I do a video, I will normally write the script one day, then film it the next, and then edit it the next, because I just kind of obsess over everything so much. Like just to be able to do all the research into it and then do commentary and then double check it to make sure what you're saying is correct and everything like that. Like, it certainly looks a lot more challenging than I think a lot of people probably think. Like, it's clearly more than just reading what's in the news.
well, a lot of people, I say a lot of people, the vast majority of people have been positive, but the majority of the detractors have been like, oh, it's so difficult to like read some un-PC opinions over a news article. And you go, well, you've probably gone through 20 or 30 news articles in order to get the 5 or 6 that you want to use. Not to mention, if stories progress and you've already written part of a script, and it's then invalidated part of the script because new information comes to light, you need to rewrite it. Then you've got the ad lib stuff and so on and so forth, which may or may not go down well. So you've got to decide what you're going to keep in that. It goes on and on, but tis fine. The it's a part of the job, but it just takes more work than people realize. Like, I'm not trying to blow it out.
Yes, I mean, we're not coal miners.
No, indeed.
There are people who go diving in the North Sea in oil platforms. So one has to see it in perspective. But it, as I say, I think it's just basically the people, I think, underestimate it. I think they just think you watch the news a bit, you sit down, you talk into the microphone, you assemble the video, and pretty much in the space of 2 or 3 hours, it's done. Not quite.
No.
Saurosapian has donated another $5. Thank you very much, sir. It says Ray Murasami should do a Halloween special. I mean, if by Halloween, well, I don't think Ray. I mean, trying to discern the facts from Ray. In fact, I'm going to pull up a.
Well, actually, she could do a special with Tailed Feature. He's the musical one.
I'm going to
She could do the Vincent Price part of the thriller.
This is for anyone who's unaware. This is what Ray looks like, and or what her avatar looks like, and this is quite an accurate statement as to her perspective. But there you go. I don't think she's actually a communist, but it is funny to have that. God. But yes, Boris appeared to mock Theresa May as he was pictured running through what looked like a field of wheat. And if I share again so that we have everything there, the politician who has been at the centre of a bitter row with the Prime Minister over her Brexit strategy was photographed running near his Oxfordshire home, appearing to recreate Mrs. May's naughtiest moment. Wasn't she asked? I can't even remember the clip where she admitted that running through a field of wheat was sort of her thing. But was it described as the naughtiest moment?
I think it was. Like, I think that's how it came about, wasn't it? Like, she was asked, like, what's the most kind of wild thing that she's done?
While campaigning ahead of last year's general election, Mrs. May memorably said yes, that the naughtiest thing she'd ever done was run through a field of wheat. Many online expressed their amusement at his apparent trolling, and it's emerged as Philip Hammond launched a scathing attack on Johnson. And did anyone read Boris's interview with the Sunday Times?
I didn't.
Can't say I have. No.
No. Basically, it's a 4,500 word mini essay, basically shredding the Chequers deal and saying we should have this Super Canada style trade deal. He manages to work the word supine in there, and I'm always a fan of whenever he manages to use the word supine. But it just tends to be a lot of personal attacks in this article. The rest of it's pure junk. But there you go. I don't know. Do you think Boris is actually making a move towards is this a publicity stunt? Do you think, or do you think it's just the nature of his prominence at the moment, which is leading the news to attribute things to him which he has not necessarily done?
Well, I mean, given that he isn't running through a field of wheat, it's kind of hard to argue that he's running through a field of wheat in order to annoy Theresa May.
And I think that if he was doing it intentionally, he would have personally made a big deal about it. Like, if there was a reporter nearby, he would have gone up to them and have at least made a comment to them so that they could run with it. It seems it's literally just him going on a jog. Like, has he actually made any comment about this? Has he said or confirmed anything?
Oh no! Of course, this is just a hit piece, effectively.
It seems to be entirely interpretive in that case.
Yes, I think it's mainly going to be due to it's mainly going to be due to the fact that they can work in a comment by Philip Hammond.
Well, I mean, this is the equivalent. This is the newspaper equivalent of, I don't know, sort of kill stream drama, isn't it? Sort of try and see what we can come up with. Because as such, yes, I mean, if he isn't running through a field of wheat, you don't have a story. And he isn't running through a field of wheat.
No, he's running through an autumn field.
I mean, there are some very interesting things going on. You know, one hears here when one sees the reporting on the BBC from the Tory party conference, whereby we've all heard that they're kind of fringe meetings and whatever, the Conservative Party conference, where the Brexiteers seem to be having meetings and are talking about what they want to do. But it appears that it's actually difficult for the journalists to get in there. So it's funny that on one side you've got a government that is effectively led by Remainers, sort of hailing this Chequers deal that the EU has now already said they don't want.
No.
And meanwhile, then you've got, you know, the kind of Boris Johnson folk, if you want, holding meetings in which they don't want any witnesses.
I truly do not understand why the EU is not jumping at Chequers, though. To be perfectly honest, because for a start, it means we basically secede Northern Ireland to them.
Well, no, that wasn't in Chequers. That is
not.
That is what they demand on top of that, effectively, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that is their solution. That is their backstop solution to a no-deal agreement or whatever. Basically, Northern Ireland would remain within the currency union or whatever, and Britain would leave. So that isn't in the Chequers agreement. It's very definitely not in the Chequers agreement. And you have to understand that she is not in a position in which she could do it even if she wanted to. So even if she felt it wasn't a matter of the political integrity of the country, she couldn't do it because, of course, if you remember, in her great wise decision to hold a general election no sooner than she triggered Article 50 in order to use up some time that we actually could have otherwise used more fruitfully in negotiations, she blew away her majority. She now relies on the Democratic Unionist Party to actually keep her in power. And the Democratic Unionists won't see Britain separated from Northern Ireland.
No, not
There's absolutely no way they're going to accept that.
Amazing.
So if she ever were to accept it, so even if she felt it was in the interest of the UK as a whole, she couldn't do it because it would be political suicide.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of things that Theresa May has done which could be considered political suicide. But somehow she hangs on.
Somehow she's still there, yes, because the Conservative Party are just proving absolutely incapable. They're hostages to their own fear. And therefore they're just not capable of actually ousting her. And everybody is too afraid of, I mean, I know he's still alive, but if you forgive me, the ghost of Michael Heseltine. Because it is the Michael Heseltine example that is basically keeping Boris Johnson from doing anything, or any other contender for that matter. Because he who wields the knife shall never wear the crown. That's the motto in the Conservative Party.
Indeed.
So Nobody wants to be the one who is disloyal to the leadership and gets rid of the,
Yes,
defunct leader. So
I think-
even though everybody realizes she must go, nobody wants to be the one who does it.
Well, particularly you stab someone in the back in order to advance your career. It doesn't go well. Someone else gets in. They don't want you stabbing them in the back, and therefore off you go.
Well, then again, I mean, Mr. Gove seems to have done well enough out of it.
Well, again, oh, you cheeky Watson.
Well, I mean, it's funny, isn't it, that the person who stabs Boris Johnson in the back pretty much 24 hours before his leadership announcement then gets promoted by Theresa May.
Yes, funny that. I suppose there's one thing to be said for stabbing not a leader in the back. It's like, I don't know why. I've just had a notification for my own stream going live. Seems a bit of a strange thing to do, seeing as I'm on it. But I suppose it'll warn me if anyone's ever compromised my account, Sutsgoen has discovered that he has a PayPal account and donated $15.52. Thank you very much, sir. And he says, burn Brussels, remove the Reich, beat the bureaucrats, take my money, and set EU up the bomb. Well, thankfully that doesn't make grammatical sense.
It's a meme. It's from a meme.
Oh wait, this meme is probably also banned.
Burn Brussels. We need to be more creative. What we should do is basically rebuild a fleet of Halifax, Stirling, and Lancaster bombers, and then fill them to the gills with sprouts, and then just keep bombing them until they're just until they're basically submerged, and then just leave it there.
Just keep bombing them until they're submerged. The Britisher 2018.
Yes, they're submerged in sprouts, and just basically just hail it as our revenge in many more ways than one would think.
Are you sure you're not Britisher Harris at this point?
Britisher Harris, yes, of course, yes, Britisher Harris. He constantly wanted a 1,000 bomber attack, didn't he? And he eventually got it. So yes, a 1,000 bomber attack filled with sprouts bombing Brussels.
Yeah. Nobody likes Brussels sprouts except me.
No one gets seriously hurt, but yes, the message is sent.
I don't know. Have you ever dropped a Brussels sprout from 20,000 feet and see how much damage it can do? I mean,
I can honestly not say that I've dropped a Brussels sprout from that height. Yes.
You've also got to take into account: are these going to be raw or cooked? Because that's a lot of extra infrastructure.
We would have to do it raw, because I think otherwise it would be too much to ask of the bomber crews.
So who's?
Well, no, you wouldn't boil it before. You would boil it before you put it on the plane, though. So it wouldn't make any difference to them. You would just have a load of chefs properly preparing them.
Can you imagine the smell? Oh, good grief. No, not sprouts. Show some mercy, Britisher, says Liberal Zardos. Sprouts are the devil's apples. I just think it's quite a bizarre idea, although I quite like the idea of it raining sprouts and the news having to somehow...
Yes,
Brussels on Brussels.
It's the fact that it's Brussels, otherwise it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. No. So we're going to move off to CERN, to the Super Hadron Large Hadron Collider. And let me just share the old screen. There we go.
Some Italian gentleman has said something, hasn't he?
Right, Alessandro Strumia, I assume I'm pronouncing that horribly, has been suspended after comments.
I'm betting these are horrendous.
Well, I mean, at first, I just want to point out that with a name like Alessandro Strumia, he should be a centre forward for Milan and not a physicist.
Show off. A senior scientist who said physics was invented and built by men has been suspended with immediate effect from working at CERN.
Is that not a fact? Is that not like the whole way in which people look at science nowadays? Was it not men who did that? So what has he said there that's inaccurate?
No, it was Isaac Newton. That's completely wrong. It was in fact it was his wife.
Oh.
It's
Oh, yes.
it's all a complete lie. Yeah.
Sybil Newton was clearly
Sybil
the one.
Newton, yes.
I'm sure a few of them retrospectively, you could say they like self-identified as non-binary.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yes, yeah, and
It's so
it was I don't know Margareta Galilei. Yes,
Wasn't it you who posted something earlier about the fact that you don't even have to shave now to be self-identified?
Yeah, so it was a Metro article, and the headline of it was just "Woman pretends to be boy," to effectively like groom children, and it's just a bloke. Like, look at that.
Here we go. That's the woman in question.
what am I missing here?
Like,
Yes, that's of course. Yes, I get it.
This is just the insanity of the modern day left, where it's just all you have to do is just say, "Oh yeah, by the way, guys, I'm a woman. That's it." And like, look, like he looks like a paedophile. Like, even if he wasn't, like, being accused of doing all this. You can
say he looks like a paedophile. I mean, what does a paedophile exactly look like?
That.
Like, people in chat are also saying it wasn't Sybil, it was Sir Eileen Newton. That's strong. But the basically trans woman 41 pretended to be a boy, because they're not actually a boy, to groom a girl.
Yeah,
that's pretty horrendous.
I think it was the original link for a woman pretends to be boy, and it just has a picture of him, and it's just
it's pretty horrendous. The but anyway, back to what we were saying. Professor Alessandro Strumia of Pisa University made the comments during a presentation organized by the European Nuclear Research Centre, and they issued a statement that suspended him pending investigation, saying his presentation was unacceptable. I love this. CERN always strives to carry out its scientific mission in a peaceful and inclusive environment. So it's like, if you've got a problem, don't raise it, because it's better to keep peace than it is.
You see, he may in fact be the one who has the last laugh, because he may be fully aware of the environment in which he is working, of course, and therefore he may have actually just wanted some additional holiday. I mean, these are very important people we're talking about.
I mean, how does 6 months off sound? Perfect. You'll never get that. Well, watch this. Apparently, this is contrary to the code of conduct, and it was very unfortunate that the scientist had views and risks overshadowing the important message and achievements of the event. Right. So,
well, this is now overshadowed it.
Well, there's an argument to be made, right, that he's chosen the wrong time and place in order to do this. On the other hand, if he wanted attention on it, he's got that. I love that the BBC ad links are suddenly massive. 7 trailblazing women, female scientists post distractingly sexy photos. And women must fight sexism in science whilst posting distractingly sexy photos.
Yeah.
So I'm just amused. You can only think of 7. Professor Strumia, who regularly works at CERN, was speaking at a workshop in Geneva on gender and high energy physics. So this was the right place, because it's a gender conference, right? It's about women in STEM, etc., etc.
Yes, and men are gender.
He told
so he had something to say on gender.
Yes,
on a conference on gender, but it just happened to be the wrong agenda on gender.
Apparently so. The wrong agenda. He's not a gender bender, but he's got the wrong agenda bender. Agenda. He told his audience of young, predominantly female physicists that his results proved that physics is not sexist against women. Now, that's an interesting statement, because I believe he's correct on this. However, the truth does not matter, because it's part of a political battle coming from outside.
And that's absolutely right.
What a ridiculous statement to have made. I mean, really, who would believe that gender advocates were actually influencing things for a political reason outside? I don't know. He produced a series of graphs. Now, I'm hoping that this will actually pull up the graphs straight away. The theory of gender talk.
Oh,
Mainstream theory, blah 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 blah. But I'm trying to see. Here we go. Percentages of women, etc. I won't bore you with that. I'm not the academic agent just yet. But he produced this series of graphs, which he claimed showed that women were hired over men whose research had been cited more by other scientists in their publications, which is an indication generally of higher quality. He also presented data that he claimed showed that male and female researchers were equally cited at the start of their careers, and men begin to outscore women as their careers progress.
Mm.
And then he had the gall, ladies and gentlemen, to have this slide. As you can see. So this is the problem, right? Joe Neverton saying, given this guy's a senior CERN physicist, I didn't know that this type of person could be disposed of so easily. Well, he's been suspended by the committee, so he's not got rid of. And it'd be interesting to see what happens with him. The Agenda Gender Benders, name of new, not so obvious new weekly show. I doubt it. I believe I've had a Streamlab as well. So it's Goen says, donated 776. Thank you very much, sir. And says, whilst I praise your ingenuity, Britisher, we must stick to traditions. Besides, the EU is filled with vegetarians. We can provide you with bacon from our bacon fields, then burn Brussels after covering it in bacon, and you can provide the eggs. So it looks like we're having a full, it's going to be a feast, the Brussels feast. Although I imagine the scum at the bottom of the pile will distastefully would discolor the taste somewhat. But back to the article. So he cites a number of different things. So he's saying Oxford University has extended exam times for women's benefit, change title.
Mm-hmm.
Italy is offering free or cheaper university for STEM female students, only female students. Scholarships for women only. Melbourne University has STEM positions for women only. Many places want 50% representation, irrespective of merit.
Well, I mean, I need to caution you here when you sort of are talking of women only, because in that sort of rather informative Metro article you cited earlier, it kind of makes quite clear that there is no such thing as women only, because you just identify as a woman.
Well,
Yes,
yeah,
you don't even need.
You don't even need to identify as a woman. The important thing is that you don't identify as a cis man, because cis men are the ones who are at the top of the pyramid of oppression, or at the bottom, whatever way. So everyone else who's below that would be able to get any of these grants.
So what you're saying is I am at the top of the pyramid of oppression.
So you are effectively
I can
at a point where
view myself as some kind of ancient pharaoh.
Yes. Pretty much, you're the one with the whipping hand, cracking it over everyone else below you, and they are helpless to stop you.
I wonder if I would sort of take to the town centre and just start behaving like Pharaoh with whip in hand. I wonder whether my being a cis male would be sufficient for people to actually do what I'm trying to persuade them to do.
You know, it's funny. I can imagine you walking around in Pharaoh garb with your rod and your staff. Just being prepared. Amazing. Also, there is a demonstrable 2-to-1 faculty preference for women on the STEM tenure track. And here are some UN conventions which say only adult able-bodied men may be called upon for forced or compulsory labor. Discrimination against men shall not be considered discrimination in Turkey. And the ERC plans give priority to specific policy objectives, 40% gender quotas, meaning 40% of funds will be going to 10% of people, rare amongst top authors.
It's interesting you said in Turkey, but it doesn't say in Turkey. It's the Istanbul Convention.
Yeah,
so that sounds like something international.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. We could look this up at some point. Or someone can tap away in the background and find out for me and message in chat or something. But the yes, Istanbul Convention Article 4, I assume it's a UN thing or an EU thing. So this is a slight problem in terms of, like, this is demonstrable, provided that he's cited things correctly and, he's got all his evidence backing it up. I don't see any issue with this particular slide. But
so the Istanbul Convention is part of the Council of Europe.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so it's action against violence against women and domestic violence. So I don't have the time to read through it now, especially when we're on air. But what I'm assuming is, in their definitions of what is considered to be, domestic abuse or general discrimination, what they're saying is like, no, if it's against men, it's not actually discrimination. It's only discrimination if it's against women.
Well, I mean, incidentally, I'm looking at Article 4 now, and I cannot actually see it anywhere saying, this doesn't apply to men.
Really? Like, how big is Article 4? Is it quite a long piece, or?
Well, I mean, you've got, point 1, parties shall take the necessary legislative and other measures to promote and protect the right for everyone, particularly women, to live free from violence in both the public and the private sphere. Parties condemn all forms of discrimination against women and take, without delay, the necessary legislative and other measures to prevent it, in particular by embodying in their national constitutions or other appropriate legislation the principle of equality between women and men and ensuring the practical realization of this principle. Prohibiting discrimination against women, including through the use of sanctions where appropriate, abolishing laws and practices which discriminate against women. The implementation of the provisions of this convention by the parties, in particular measures to protect the rights of victims, shall be secured without discrimination on any ground such as sex, gender, race, colour, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, association with a national minority, property, birth, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, state of health, disability, marital status, migrant or refugee status, or other status. Special measures that are necessary to prevent and protect women from gender-based violence shall not be considered discrimination under the terms of this convention. That's it. That's Article 4. So, it obviously, as usual, makes a sort of a big brouhaha about women this, women that, but in no place does it actually specifically rule out men, doesn't it?
No, it does. No, I've got Article 4 up now. You're right. I mean, it's... Yeah.
So it may be reaching here.
Yes.
So, in point 1, it basically does say, particularly women. But other than that, I mean, when you go through that huge...
Well, I mean, if it's something that's specifically talking about women, of course it's going to say particularly women.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
that's not a bad thing. It doesn't
so as
have
such,
to say
that
about
doesn't
men as well.
seem to me to be a discriminatory article, unless I'm missing something here. But, I mean, that seems to be the entire article.
What's it? Radio Freedom says, if I recall correctly, Istanbul Convention basically writes "listen and believe" into law. I don't know whether or not there's just that specific article, but there you go.
Well, I could well imagine there might, this seems to be a long convention. We're looking at, I'm scrolling down here. I'm just gone past Article 62. And I mean, you got an idea of how long Article 4 was. So it goes as far as Article 81. So you'll forgive me if I don't read the whole thing.
Yes, indeed. I will forgive you. Don't worry. I think the thing we can take from this is he's acquired some evidence. Some of it may and may not be completely accurate. Or he's taking liberties with the way things are written because the exclusionary tone of the article is there, but it's not explicit.
But it's not about men, it's about women. So that's why it's going to be worded like that.
So yeah, absolutely. And then he's showing the career path, and he's basically saying that there's no difference in the hiring, particularly at early stages. And then it's just a case of that. So
then one of the groups goes off to have baby. I think that's what he's pretty much indicating, isn't he?
So when the BBC contacted the professor, he said, people tell me that physics is sexist, physics is racist. I made some simple checks and discovered it wasn't, that it was becoming sexist against men, and I said so. Because and truly I believe that a lot of the checks and measures that are put in place currently that were designed to alleviate
well, isn't it said that in universities these days the overwhelming majority of medical students are female?
I don't know. I know that in certain, I know doctors, specifically medicine. Yes.
So I mean, in that case, what measures are being taken? Do you understand what I mean? It seems as if one is desperate to take measures for in fields where males predominate, which invariably there will be a preference. But in those areas in which there is a female preference, and clearly therefore women predominate, for some reason there is no discussion of any measures being necessary to alleviate this.
So indeed, so well, the issue is that they've said there's an issue with an underrepresentation of women in this field, and then they've instantiated things, because this is where it is, things like affirmative action in America, and things like scholarship programs purely for women, and then they just have let them continue. And then because it would put certain people out of a job, presumably to remove these programs, because now that the programs are built into the university, they have to justify the removal of them. And you can't remove them by saying, "Oh, we've got enough women." I mean, that's a career death sentence in the sort of the left-leaning universities as well. It's like they'll probably make some adjustment, and people sort of sweep it under the rug, and it just continues to exist, and the percentage continues to grow. Or worse, they say it's still not good enough, and they keep pushing it because they won't be happy until it's almost entirely all women. Which is entirely possible. But last month, Professor Jocelyn Bell Burnell, and I believe she's a Nobel Prize winning physicist. Female astronomer. She was awarded a breakthrough prize for the discovery of radio pulsars, which was a subject of the Physics Nobel in 1974. But her male collaborators received the award at the time. I don't know whether or not how much about that incident was sexist, or whether or not she was a junior researcher at the time, or whatever, or who was taking credit. But I'll waive judgment and take it at face value at this time. And but basically, she said that unconscious bias against women is preventing them from getting jobs in physics research. Now, unconscious bias literature, as Jordan Peterson says, is remarkably underwhelming.
Well, I mean, in that case, as I say, the example I used before, in that case, we'll just translate that into unconscious bias against men is preventing them from getting jobs in medical research.
However, a major study published in 2012 showed that science faculty members rated identical job applications more highly when presented to them with a male name rather than a female name. Now, that is something I think could have something to it.
This blind testing tends usually to be a good way of going about it. Yes,
indeed. So it's interesting that seems to be a thing, but I wonder where it was. This is the US as well.
And I've heard that it doesn't always quite have the same the effect one wants. In some cases, some of the blind tests in some areas have actually made it more profound, rather than less so.
In tech, in particular, they did a study a few years ago, which basically they expected to see that women and minority groups would have a distinct disadvantage, and they found out that there was about a 16% advantage in the named study than in the blind study. So the control group selected with a bias, and those who were given blank CVs with no prior information didn't, and it was much less biased, but it didn't suggest the right things, so that study got swept away. Yeah, not ideal. And there you go. But this I think could have some merit. Scientists reacted to Professor Stromeyer's presentation on social media, complaining about discrimination they had suffered in the course of their work. And again, this is just the nature of media, I guess. Like, it's anecdotal. And this is the trouble. And scientists in particular should have like an anti-anecdote attitude, but a lot of them don't, and it is problematic. So it's like this person here, Jennifer L. Rohn, says, it's damn difficult to do great science when you're always navigating the minefield of bias and disregard. The expectation that you must make the psychological tea, because you don't get told to make tea. When asserting yourself makes you a bitch, yeah, and if you're a guy, it makes you an asshole. Even getting a word in without interruption can be a challenge. Who would have guessed that STEM is a competitive industry, where you have to fight to say what you need to say, and the idea that guys don't have to do that as well.
I think a lot of this is just perceived more than anything. You're going to have groups of people saying to them, you are oppressed. These people are going out of their way to make sure that you don't succeed, and watch for the signs. They're going to be acting in this way. They're going to be saying these things, and then they'll go out to work, and then they will see these behaviors, and it's almost like confirmation bias. They'll be looking out for it, and so when they finally see it, their most logical explanation for it is going to be, oh, well, it must be misogyny. It must be discrimination. And I come from a community which thrives on telling people that they cannot achieve things, that as an oppressed person, everyone else out there is going to be doing everything they can to harm you in every little way possible. And if anything is bad which is happening to you, it could be because of who you are, not because of anything that you may or may not have done.
Well, there is also, of course, the fact that, if you're building space rockets and one in your team has a possible insight that, whereby they kind of suspect that some change that has been made might lead to the rocket exploding on the launch pad, you will then just dismiss that, of course, because she's the woman on the team. I mean, to my mind, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense, because in the end, science deals with a search for truth.
Yeah.
And the idea that they're all just sitting there going, no, we'll sooner believe in something wrong before we allow the woman to open her mouth. That just doesn't seem to make any sense as far as I'm concerned.
Kind of flies in the face of logic, doesn't it? Here's something for you, Bridger, though. The Discord has been hard at work. Is this accurate? I mean, I'm assuming this is historical and it's not fictional.
Would I be right in assuming that yes, that this would be me in the town centre? Sort of how should we say, applying my pharaonic presence.
I think the only thing that could make this meme better is if that was Sargon being whipped.
Yes, I mean there is a certain similarity there, to be honest. When you look at there is a certain sort of Mesopotamian feel to that particular character. But I don't think that in my pith helmet I look sufficiently Egyptian to kind of pull off the pharaoh look, to be honest.
So we need a picture of you with the pharaoh headgear, like, put on, basically.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
I would effectively have to be Tutankhamun, or perhaps more. I mean, his dad had more of a style, didn't he? Akhenaten.
Akhenaten.
He's the one who, you just look at the, you read the history and you look at the you look at the statues and whatever, and you sort of think, oh yeah, this is the chap who kind of was somewhat more let's just say individualistic as pharaohs go.
Akhenaten was a funny one, just generally because I only discovered about Akhenaten through Philip Glass, because he does a suite. He's a minimalist composer, and I was obsessed with his music at GCSE. So one of those funny things where I think I had to answer a question in your quiz, wasn't it, where the answer was Akhenaten?
Yes, there was something that was. I think actually the answer was Tutankhamun, because his birth name would have been Tutankhaten.
Yes.
And then of course they get rid. The priests basically manage to reassert themselves again, and the entire sort of religion that was around Akhenaten is gotten rid of. One no longer just worships that one god, the Aten, and instead, of course, the head god among the Egyptian pantheon then basically comes back in again, and that then is Amun. So he then his name is then changed from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun in order to have a name that refers to the correct god, which is kind of the ultimate political conversion, isn't it?
Indeed.
In order to maintain my position now, I'll change my name because I've got the wrong god in it.
So, how long before the academic agent becomes the academic sneak?
Oh, there is that. Yes.
Regardless,
The spy agent.
The sly agent, indeed. I think I have him as a subversive element on my Discord server. The CERN, which currently has its first ever woman director general, said in an earlier statement, organisers were not aware of the content prior to the workshop. Confirmed there was a video recording of the presentation, and senior management would decide whether to release it. In 2015, I love this, like this little smear that you have here extra. Is Professor Tim Hunt, if you recall that. I remember this particular story, telling young female scientists in South Korea that the trouble with having girls in the lab was that when you criticize them, they cry. If I recall correctly, because I think he came out and just said it was supposed to be an offhand funny comment, and it was just it was not taken particularly well.
Like I can see why it would fall on deaf ears. Put it like that.
Well, apparently there was no, if I recall correctly, the entire Tim Hunt situation was later portrayed in a completely different way than it was actually received at the time. So it did not at all bomb his presentation. You know, the way in which it was presented to us was that everybody was sitting there aghast, thinking, "Oh my God, you know, what a terrible man! How can he?" Whereas that's not at all how he came across at the time. The audience were quite happy, but there just happened to be a fairly militant feminist in among the audience, and she basically then just used it for her own devices.
So it's just one person out of, say, like 100 who decided that who took it out of context and was able to run with it.
The conference was perfectly happy with Tim Hunt's presentation. There was no problem whatsoever. There weren't any women walking out in a huff, and no, everyone was perfectly happy.
This just shows the power of offense. It doesn't matter whether everybody else is okay with it. You just need the one person to be unhappy.
Yes,
and that's it. Your context no longer matters.
So Soot's going in chat is saying British is correct. It was a single female reporter who spurred out, and so it wasn't even a scientist who's worked in a lab. It was the reporter who was reporting on the conference itself, and you just go, "Yeah, well, amazing."
The power of offense in that regard has always been there.
Yeah.
So you just have to look at television, for example. Over here we have got, you can complain, and it's incredible how much power complainants wield.
Yeah.
You can have a program that is watched by, say, 2.5 million people, and they will get 8 complaints, and they'll go, "Oh, something needs to change. We've got 8 complaints here." You, the presenter of this program, what have you got to say about it?
Yeah.
And you just go, "I'm sorry, but given how many people have seen this, what about the 2 million people who did not complain?"
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of is it Jeremy Vine who did the Channel 5 show? Well, yeah, because I think it was a few months ago, and he had, it's a woman from like the Beast, I think it was, or something like that, one of those quiz shows on ITV, and also had Paris Lees, who's a transsexual journalist, and the other woman said to Paris that you used to be a boy, and then someone complained into the show, and as a result of that, Jeremy Vine was told to apologise, and he refused, so he stepped down from the role.
Yeah, that sounds just like British media.
Yeah.
We have had a sort of long-standing problem with that, and I remember this is decades ago. There was somebody who actually wrote an article in which he basically said what people ought to do, almost as a matter of course, is every time any new program comes on television, any new program comes on the radio, they should write letters complaining vociferously there is not enough nudity, There is not enough bad language. There has not
Yeah.
been enough violence. I want to, I demand to see more beheaded people. There is not enough gore. That is he basically said that is effectively the only way of stemming the tide, because the people will use their offense, their outrage, like a weapon.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the ultimate irony of just how much this man has been proven right. That by now we have got precisely this situation where outrage rules. But effectively, yes, that anything that happens before any complaints even come in, there should be the complaint saying it hasn't gone far enough. Because what would they do if this Italian chap had he'd hosted his speech? Because again, we have no idea how many people actually were offended by this.
No,
all
none
we're
at all.
told is, he said this to a shed load of women that were sitting there, and the implication is, they were all terribly offended.
Yeah.
Oh, and the
Chances are
implication
the
is
overwhelming majority of them, just sort of thought, okay, he has a different opinion. I don't necessarily agree, but who cares?
also,
Yeah.
well, you think about things like his presentation style, like all of this is put out there as like he's basically done a hit piece on women in STEM and on the establishment, and when realistically what he's probably done is given a coherent presentation and that sort of thing that's been recorded, that he's been allowed to get to the end of it for a start, so he's clearly not come across as a raving madman.
No.
Because they're debating whether or not to release even some of it rather than pulling the whole lot anyway.
Yeah.
And then so you've got this thing. He's been relatively cogent, so I imagine that when they investigate him, they'll basically investigate all of his cited sources and all that jazz, and then work out whether or not they can do him on any of those. So they may well catch him out on this Istanbul thing.
But it may well be that this actually took up 1 minute of a presentation that lasted half an hour.
Also entirely possible, yes.
Yeah.
But again, my point is, if basically half a dozen people would immediately have basically complained, saying he didn't go far enough, what would they do if they then had one or two complaints saying, this was terribly sexist, and they had half a dozen complaints saying, this was by far not harsh enough, he should have been much clearer on the women are useless in science angle,
a lot of it probably would have been based on who are making these complaints.
But do you understand what I mean? If you have that sort of approach, then how does the outrage of the people who are constantly trying to manipulate things by feigning outrage, how does that how does that work?
Well, the best way of countering this is the people who make these complaints about being outraged, about being offended. They're often collectivist in nature, and they claim to speak on behalf of the entire group that they think was offended by it. So in this instance, it'll be someone who will be saying, I'm speaking on behalf of women everywhere who are offended and disgusted by this. But it always makes the assumption that all women think the same, that all women are going to be offended by this. And the majority probably don't give a shit.
I imagine to a great degree that a lot of his, I could be completely wrong here, and it is speculation, but given the nature of the conference being about gender in science, that you go, he was probably trying to alleviate the fears and then add on the fact at the end that, in fact, you can actually see that, because he's clearly done some research because he's been invited to speak at this conference. So he's probably saying to women, don't worry if you are worried about there being a particular bias in physics in particular about the idea that you're going to be unfairly discriminated against. Look at all these things that are going for you. In fact, we probably ought to take a look at the fact that it seems to be swinging the other way. Right.
So it's more of like an end to his speech rather than standing up for about 90 minutes saying actually it's men who are oppressed.
So it's a problematic. I think I need to wait. I'll probably be following this one actually because it's
It'll be interesting if we actually get to see exactly what was said and what the context of it was.
I really hope someone somewhere releases the full, either a transcript or the full presentation.
Yeah, like if you're actually going to a conference.
Rose, you are completely out. You have turn off your microphone. That is horrendous. Your mic.
You'll have to turn down the volume on her.
I'm going to unfortunately, Rose, your microphone has completely imploded.
Yes.
It's basically gone.
I think that was the sound that normally kind of would follow the words "Houston, we have a problem."
Yes, a lot of static. There we go. That's better.
Okay. Yeah. So apologies for that. Someone tried to drag me into a Skype call whilst this was going on, and it seems to have messed things up. Apologies for that.
That's fine. Seems to be. I just for chat. I feel sorry for anyone who's wearing headphones because
I'm very, very sorry. This doesn't normally happen.
Well, as it is, I'm wearing headphones.
I hope I didn't hurt you, Britisher.
Oh dear.
I don't know if I'll ever hear high frequencies ever again.
People complaining about getting Ray flashbacks. It's a walkie-talkie. Her cat clearly just exploded. But no, I think I'll follow this story further. But I do have something a little spicy now that you may or may not have seen, Mr. Bachar and Rose. So here we are. How to be a sex worker. Advice for freshers.
This I have heard
came across that title. I haven't read the article yet, but I came across the title. Yes. A
stand at Brighton University event offered new students tips on how to be prostitutes. Much in the same vein as something like, if you're going to take drugs, this is the safe way to take them.
Yeah,
I think that is very
done very much in that way.
If you're going to do it. Unfortunately, this has the potential to be yet even more damaging because it doesn't propose it in a negative light at all.
No.
A university has been accused of encouraging its students into prostitution. I used to live in Brighton, man. Like, this is horrendous.
But you seem surprised that Brighton is going to be doing something like this.
Not
like how long were you last in Brighton?
I was in Brighton. I lived most of my life in Brighton, so it was pretty horrendous. Like, Brighton's a nice place and all, but this sort of stuff is there. A university has been accused of encouraging prostitution after hosting a stand advising undergraduates how to be sex workers.
In all fairness, I need to speak up in defense of them here. I think we're seeing more than likely something similar going on here, as we were with Mr. Alessandro Strumia. That basically one is taking something that was said and then kind of tilting the angle.
No.
No.
There was an actual stall promoting this.
Here we go. There was a stand run by the Sex Workers Outreach Project, calling itself an advocacy and advice service representing student sex workers. Swap tweeted, 1 in 6 students does sex work or thinks about turning to sex work. We can help.
Wow! Oh my God!
The group publishes leaflets offering tips on how to be a prostitute, reassuring those who are considering it, you cannot be prosecuted for selling sex. It is not illegal to work as an escort or to sell sexual services. Offering a wide range of advice on techniques for safer escorting, including, if you don't have anyone to look out for you, fake it. Make your punter think that someone else knows where you are. Pretend to make a call to make it look like you're confirming your arrival. Put men's shoes or clothes out. And so on. Not got a problem with free condoms and lubricant because that's just everywhere at freshers.
Oh God, yeah.
But and a wheel of sexual well-being is just funny.
But this should not surprise anyone that this is being done within the NUS. The NUS often promotes like similar things with drugs, but on top of that, if you actually look into some of the people who are like NUS officers, there are a surprising number of them who are sex workers themselves. They will even have links to their actual adult online website escorting services on their Twitter profile, whilst also promoting NUS stuff. So these things have gone hand in hand for a very long time. And there is nothing that, and the NUS will not call this out. The NUS is perfectly happy with people, even like in most jobs.
I guess
that you can,
I guess when it comes to the NUS, one can say that to a certain extent it serves a purpose, because it's a well-known fact that sex work among students has gone up with student tuition fees having come about. So of course they quite like the idea of promoting the idea that this is happening in order to kind of further their argument against student tuition fees.
Just to make
I kind of see where you're coming from there, but that wouldn't be the ideology which is pushing it. Just
to be clear, just for anyone, before we go any further, the NUS is the National Union of Students, which is the student-run, student-organised union of different student unions throughout the UK universities.
Strictly speaking, they just ought to change their name these days and refer to themselves as the National Platform Denial Organisation.
Yes, they are very, very left-leaning. They're the people who are pushing things like racial bias training,
prison abolition.
Yes,
in fact, many of them.
Abolition.
Yes. So I did a video a few months ago on the NUS Trans Conference. Just to let you know, the trans officer for the NUS, called Jess Bradley, was suspended over 2 months ago for getting a dick out at work, masturbating, taking a photo of it, and putting it online. 2 months ago, that happened, and they're still looking into it. Anyway, what they were talking about at their conference was, if you're talking about trans issues, you'd be thinking things like healthcare, like being able to access like things like DPOS, stuff like that. Their main focuses were on fighting fascism. They never defined what fascism was. They focused
on trans people, I assume.
But it wasn't even that. They added a line saying that there are far right people who are getting LGBT people to question like ethnic minorities, and as basically it was a roundabout way of saying, don't think that these particular groups could be in any way homophobic or transphobic, otherwise you're far right. And it even pretty much endorses violence by saying that they endorse shutting them down by any means necessary.
Yeah, they are proud proponents of the BAMN.
Yeah, very much so.
Sort of way of doing things.
But yeah, one of their big things is prison abolition, and quite a few of the NUS campaigns focus on it. So they will go into universities and talk about why we should get rid of prisons. Now, the NUS wasn't even successful to stop tuition fees, which is their bread and butter. And they somehow seem to think that they'll be able to get prisons abolished.
But
which is really fucking dumb.
This seems completely counterintuitive. That's why this kind of surprises me, because we are looking at the left very much being constantly talking about the rape statistics of women and whatever.
Yes.
There not being enough convictions of rapists and so on. Well, where would we put the convicted rapists? If
maybe they'll start.
Good question.
Maybe they'll start abolishing women's prisons, and then forget about the men's prisons.
I know, but do you understand what I mean? I find that concept really strange.
They are almost suicidal.
And
these are the same ones. Some of them even are in favor of abolishing the military and stuff like that as well.
Yep.
So
a lot of them.
You're talking to someone here who is very wishy-washy on prisons. I mean, I really think that we're locking up far too many people and so on. But even I kind of balk at the idea of, well, hang on a moment, abolish prisons? Yeah.
It is something which is strange, and there's a group. They link to themselves to different groups. Like one of them, which is called Action for Trans Health, because they're called Trans Health. Naturally, their big thing is prison abolition. For some reason, obviously. I mean, I shouldn't even have to point this out. But they sent out tweets along the lines of need to release all trans prisoners. Now, interestingly, these are the kind of people who believe that all you have to say is you're a woman and therefore you're a woman. So, you know, like the lovely lady that we saw before who was pretending to be a boy. But also this would include a particular Ian Huntley who has decided to try and identify as a woman. So these groups pretty much advocate for releasing the Soham killer. You know, they don't really think through a lot of what they say. They have this weird idea that trans is beautiful and anyone who is trans, they cannot do anything wrong because they're all good collectivist following lefties. And that's simply not true.
Yeah, well, this is the thing with group identity, like the collectivism, where it's like if one of them does something bad, it's like, oh, they're not one of us, not really, or they will alienate them somehow. You see it with the
I get it all the time.
You get it with race politics in the US and all sorts.
Yeah, like with race politics, it's Uncle Tom's. With the trans thing, you'll be called true scum, which I kind of like.
True scum.
True scum, because I'm scum.
Of course, makes perfect sense.
I will say that, you know, coming back to the original article, I still reserve the right to be somewhat skeptical about your interpretation here.
Very well.
I still don't think that this is necessarily kind of, you know, a stall that is seeking to encourage people into prostitution.
I'll read this then. Swap defended its presence at Freshers' event, saying in a tweet, later deleted, rising living and tuition costs mean that more students than ever are turning to sex work, and Swap believe that they deserve our help as well. Sex work is work. It added that it did not idealize or encourage sex work, but offered support and advice without judgment, which is where you're coming from,
yes,
Britisher. However, it's interesting to note that the feminists have been up in arms about this, and which is quite funny given that they seem to flip-flop on the issue of sex work from day to day.
It depends on the feminists that you talk to.
Indeed.
Like, feminism is of all the identity politics movements, feminism is one of the most interesting because there are so many different churches of feminism within the whole religion of it, if that makes sense.
The one feminist activist, Sarah Ditum, said, "This is essentially a grooming operation, pitching prostitution as a manageable, desirable lifestyle equivalent to joining the rowing club, preying on the naivety of young students, incredibly irresponsible, promoting an industry that is the cause of massive violence and exploitation against women as if it were the same as working in a bar." So I think that there can be I think that it's entirely possible that whilst they're saying, oh, you know, we don't judge and we're offering support, that they're also glamorizing it in a way of going, oh, you can't be arrested for this. And
absolutely.
I honestly don't think they're doing that. I think in all honesty, it's the other feminist, the one who's going all outrageous, who basically represents a large part of this kind of, you know, hostility towards anything that is sexual.
Oh,
because
there's
to my mind, you know, this is a situation of a bit like with heroin addicts, just making sure they have clean needles. That doesn't necessarily mean you're encouraging people to be heroin addicts. It just basically means, well, you have to manage the situation somehow.
I understand where you're coming from, and yes, there are, like, in some parts of feminism, there is a lot which is very, very sex negative. Like, you go all the way out to those people who would say, even if you have sex with a man, that's rape. I won't say Sarah Dyson.
Andrea Dworkin said that, yes, and she is the most quoted feminist par excellence. So, in that regard, yes, it is. It's at the very heart of feminism. Yes,
it is.
And funny thing is that in a way, it intersects. You know, if one dare use the word intersect with intersectionality, but it intersects with the right, with you know, Christian attitudes, and we have to understand that whereas when it came to the banning of pornographic material and whatever previously, it was it was Mary Whitehouse, it was the Christian right. Now it's the feminists.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same Puritanism. But it's now the other side. It's basically just switched parties, effectively.
Mm.
Sorry,
Right,
chat.
yeah.
Just consider this: there are schools of feminism that call themselves sex negative.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm assuming that's the school of feminism that the academic agent belongs to, Bridger.
Well, I mean, he's the one who says Mary Whitehouse did nothing wrong.
Wow.
Of course he did.
Which, yes, is definitely one of those things for which he shall burn in hell for all eternity. Because, yes, if there is anybody of whom you could say sort of one particular individual had a malign influence, then I think Mary Whitehouse comes pretty close to Tony Blair, to be honest.
So
Oof.
why doesn't he think she's done anything wrong?
Because I think he is kind of, as he further and further slides towards the right, he
Yeah.
has somehow come to the idea that, the 1950s nuclear family was the kind of rose-colored ideal, and everything that ever moved society away from that was, the work of the Beelzebub, and therefore Mary Whitehouse is seen as a martyr seeking merely to staunch that trend, and therefore she should be seen as a wonderful, insightful woman. And Margaret Thatcher liked her, so she must be right.
Oh yeah, no, he definitely moves more towards the whole nuclear family kind of thing. Like the other day we were talking about in the Discord about polyamory, and he was explaining how that's like severely detrimental to society, and it's a sliding back towards like more uncivil. Yeah, pretty much.
Basically, his idea was it was degeneracy, but more natural.
It's worth pointing out, of course, that degeneracy, and the word degenerate, is one of those words that is constantly turning up on the alt-right.
Is it now?
Yeah. Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
Degenerate is to the alt-right what problematic is to the left. Just watch out for that word. It is one of the telltale words of the alt-right is degenerate.
Interesting.
So if you're listening...
I've started picking it up.
If you start using the word degenerate, you're clearly all right, apparently. There you go. The Britisher labelling once again.
So says the Britisher.
Yeah. What can we do?
Well, no, I don't frequent alt-right content. To look out for that word. It is really, really telling just how often it crops up in any kind of alt-right sort of literature or conversations or whatever. It's just speckled across the text constantly, in just the same way as you just constantly come across problematic, and this is problematic, and the other is problematic, when you come to these kind of social justice tracts.
Right, ladies and gents, I'm really sorry, but I'm in a great deal of pain right now, so I'm going to have to bring the stream to a close. Thank you very much to my guests, the Britisher.
Well, thanks for having me.
And Rose of Dawn.
And thanks for finally getting me on.
No problem. I'm sure we could do it again. Unfortunately, yes. In terms of the degenerate thing, I don't frequent a lot of alt-right content, so that's probably why that's the case, that I've not picked that one up. Unlike the Britisher, who is clearly steeped in alt-right lore.
Well, I mean, obviously, because that's one of the things that the lefties always referred to me as.
Indeed. But
called a kind of communist by the friends of Academic Agent, and then I'm called an alt-righter by the various left-wingers.
But there we go. Thank you for joining me and going through these silly little articles. I'll catch you again next week on Monday, next Monday, if all goes well, at 8 p.m. the usual time. Thank you all for being here. Good night.
Toodle pip.